Hello once again. You're welcome to a session on organizational culture in business. For this session, we're going to define organizational culture, corporate culture, and group culture. We'll look at the significance of culture for management and factors that shape the culture of an organization. In addition, we'll examine what three authors on culture have said. One is Edgar Schein, and then Handy and Hofstede. So we'll examine whatever they've said on culture within the organization and see how best we can apply that within an organization. So let's begin. What is culture? Now, if you have your manual or your book, we're discussing page 63, and it talks about culture as a set of dominant beliefs, attitudes, values, norms, and these are shared by a number of people. So what do you believe in within the organization? How do you react or respond to a situation? That's an attitude. Okay, what are your values? What are your norms? Now, all these things put together can be classified as the culture of a given organization or people. Within organizations, people share values, people share beliefs, and they may think in a certain dimension. Now, let's not forget that with every organization, you may have policies, structures, and politics. Okay, so as we interact with the organization and in line with the policies of the organization, then this culture system is formed and we have our corporate culture. Now, once you have a culture, let's not forget that it may affect the expectations of employees in the company. Once they know what the company should achieve or know the direction of the organization, then the culture would one way or that affect the behavior or expectations of employees. Now, with this in mind, again, let's look at how Shane talks about culture. Look at the second point bulleted. A culture is a set of assumptions that a group of people working together have invented, discovered, or developed by learning how to deal with problems that the organization faces internally and its external environment. So again, you could see from here that it talks about how a group of people working together may create culture or may discover or develop how to deal with things in the organization. So once they have a standardized way of handling situation, once they have a way they've agreed to deal with the situation, it becomes the culture. Okay, and therefore it could be problems caused by the internal environment of the organization or the external environment of the organization. Okay, now once it works for them, let's not forget, it mentioned the fact that it's a set of assumptions. Now, once these assumptions work well enough, then whoever joins the organization is taught that these are our values, these are our culture, and therefore you must learn to fit in. If you don't fit in on the culture of the organization, you can't fit in the organization, and you may not last within the organization. So it's important that more often than not, culture is taught to people in the organization. Now, let's look at organizational culture. We talk about a set of beliefs, values, and attitudes that is shared by everyone in the organization. It means, therefore, that everyone in the organization plays along those beliefs, accept those values, and therefore work with it. So, as people define culture, the way of life of a group of people, we can add that it's the way we do things within an organization. This is how things are done. Maybe I'll give an example. Compare a public organization to a private organization. Will you see a difference in how things are done in these organizations? Of course, in a public organization, you realize that things are done much different from a private organization, and therefore the cultures of these organizations may be different and not the same. Okay, now what did Peter and Woman talk about? That most excellent business organizations are characterized by particular culture, attitudes, and beliefs. Therefore, it means that they normally go by a similar culture, similar beliefs, okay, and that has empowered them to excel in what they do as an organization, okay. And therefore, we could see that for corporate culture, how are organizations managed? Sometimes we normally interchange organizational culture with corporate culture. It is true to some extent, okay. But what then is corporate culture? The way by which an organization as a whole is managed. And this is different from organizational culture. The organizational culture deals with the values, the beliefs, the assumptions that members of the organization hold. But how are they governed? How are they managed? It comes from the top, and therefore it is referred to as corporate culture. Now, what about the work groups? Now, work groups may also have their own unique culture. For instance, in an organization, you may have different departments, like the sales department, marketing department. These are work groups within the organization. And these work groups may have their own subculture, which may exist within the organization. Okay, so you can have an example here. The culture in the sales department might be very different from the culture in the accounts department. And both cultures may differ from the culture of the research and development staff. Okay, so we have put culture into three groups. First of all, we mentioned organizational culture. Then we said these are the values that people share in the organization. We spoke about corporate culture, how it is managed, and then work group culture. That is culture that belongs to the subgroups or the task groups in the organization. Okay. Now, this is some difference you can see regards culture. Like the example I gave you, culture may vary from one organization to the other, even from the informal organization. Okay, so I gave an example that in the public organization, it could be different from a private organization. Okay, but when somebody joins an organization, you are made to learn the culture of organization. What happens in an informal organization? With an informal organization, take note, it is no larger than the individuals who interact socially at work. And the nature of the informal organization can change when individuals leave or join. If you remember it too, we learned that we have the formal organization and we have the informal organization. And therefore, the informal organization grows alongside the formal organization. So in this context, based on the need to interact, based on social interaction, informal organizations are formed. Okay. Now, as people leave, people join the organization, it affects the culture of this informal group within the organization. However, we say culture is difficult to change. Once it becomes acceptable within the organization, it becomes so difficult to change. That's why we say it is deeply embedded. Now let's look at the significance of culture for management. Why is culture important within an organization? And according to Edgar Schein, the concept of culture is still misunderstood in organizations, being treated too much as a superficial phenomenon. What does it mean? According to him, culture is a very deep phenomenon. And if managers of organization want to change the culture, they must understand how the culture works before they can change it. Okay, so they don't understand how culture works in the organization, it will be difficult to change the culture in the organization. Okay, so to what extent can you lead successfully? You must understand the culture before you can lead. Okay, so what is the culture of the organization where you work in? Do you really understand the culture? And that can help you in organization management. Now, again, we can add, you must have to understand the group culture. Okay, now, if you understand the group culture, then you can influence it and encourage positive attitudes to work. What does it mean? Let's not forget that we have the task culture, subgroup culture within the organization. Now, to what extent can you motivate employees to encourage positive attitude to work unless you understand the group culture? Otherwise, you fail in driving them to work towards success. Okay, so if you look at the next point, why do we say this? Because of the task groups, there are subcultures in organization, and each subculture may either enhance work or retard work. And therefore, as a leader in management, if you want to build an effective organization, then it's important that you understand these subcultures in organization and see how best you can merge them with the different subcultures and to propel them towards success within the organization. It's important that you understand the culture. That's how come the term corporate culture came about. Okay, so as I said, it is how you manage the organization based on how you understand the culture of the organization. Now, according to Shane, he mentioned the fact that successful managers develop a positive corporate culture. If it's positive corporate culture, then it means that you understand the culture and therefore you can guide them to have positive attitude to work within the organization. Now let's look at factors that will shape the culture of the organization. And the first one I talk about is the formal structure and size of the organization. Now let's not forget that the size, the structure of the organization, culture influences one way or the other. Okay, so to what extent will culture affect the size of the organization and the formal structure? It's based on how things are done within the organization. So if how things are done, you prefer a particular style or trend, then a type of structure which is not ideal will be taken off for a structure which will support the culture of the organization. That is one. If you said that people can undertake tasks of other people, you will not need large workforce because people can multitask. Okay, so if multitask becomes like a culture of the organization, then the size of the workforce may not be that large. So if you see how the structure and the size, culture has an influence on them. That's the first one. The second point is about leadership. It's also a factor that can shape organizational culture. Now, the leaders of the organization can influence culture. Why? They state the values of the organization. Okay, they state the goals and what they want to accomplish, and therefore they direct the effort of every one organization towards accomplishing the strategies and goals of the organization. As you do that, what happens? The culture is being built and developed within the organization, and therefore, as a second factor, leadership plays an important role. Let's not forget that the environment also plays a role. We discussed the environment and we discussed it in Unit 4, internal environment and external environment again. Okay, culture would grow or develop within an environment. Okay, so as you react to the environment, you're developing a culture. And the fourth point, events. Okay, so as a result of events which occurs and how you respond to these events, the culture of the organization also develops. Let's go to ICA Ghana. ICA Ghana also has its culture, how they handle students, right down to how exams is conducted and how results are released. Okay, now this has been based on what has happened over the years. Okay, syllabus has been changed a couple of times to suit the environment. Okay, now in supervising students, how things are done, what are the expectations? Okay, this will bring out a sort of acceptable behavior, okay, which may inform the culture of ICAG, how they handle student affairs. And therefore, all these factors may shape the culture of the organization. Now, this in mind, let's look at what schools, Johnson and schools talk about when they try to analyze corporate culture. Please don't forget that we discuss culture from 3 dimensions: organizational culture, corporate culture, and then the task culture or the group culture. Okay, so now let's see how schools, and we said for corporate culture, it deals with how the organization is managed. Okay, so let's look at what schools, how schools discuss the corporate culture. Now, for schools, use the term the culture web. Culture web. Okay. Now, every organization has this culture web. Okay. So, like a spider web, likewise, the culture web, and it's made up of 6 interrelated elements of culture within the organization. Now, what are these 6 interrelated elements? The first one is a routine and rituals. Okay, if you say something is a routine, how things are done, okay, around an organization. Now, if you follow such routine, how things are done, okay, it helps you to know how you behave towards each other and even to outsiders. Okay, so you go to ICAJ, you want to make an inquiry, you're told where to go, okay, who to speak to, and know where to start from. Okay, and you have your certificates, they can tell you that, oh, with this, you have these exemptions, you can go straight to this level, we need to start from this level. Okay, so it's a routine. Okay, what about rights? These are special events in the life of the organization, and they are seen as very important. So one of the rituals is your graduation. So we have to carry out graduation for all students who qualify. It's a ritual. Okay, and it's part of the culture of the organization. Now, the second one, the web, is called the stories and myth. Now, what are stories, the story, and the myth? They used to describe the history of the organization, okay, and to suggest the importance of certain individuals or events. So in some organizations, when you go to their boardroom, you see pictures of former CEOs within the organization and the years which they led the organization. It's a story. Okay. Now, so once you go through, it helps appreciate where they were and where they are now. Okay. And sometimes they are passed by word of mouth. Okay. So for myths or stories, because sometimes it can be difficult to challenge established myth. Have you heard that when this person was the CEO of this organization, this thing occurred? He led to us doing XYZ. Okay, and they can't be changed, unlike stories. Okay, now what's a symbol? A symbol too is like a sign, and it represents the nature of the organization. Okay, so like cars do have symbols. Okay, organizations do have logos. Okay, and or jargons which the employees may use. And once it sticks to the organization, it's part of the culture web. The next one is the power structure. And for the power structure, this deals with individuals who are in positions of power within the organization. Okay, so when you become part of the management team, one way or the other, you have that power to rule an organization. But power can come from personal influence or by experience you gained or by expertise that you have. Let's say that you're an IT person organization, and whenever there's an IT issue, you are more often called to come and help resolve. Okay, this gives you some degree of power over your colleagues who may not be IT inclined. Okay, or you've risen to their ranks of a degree of experience, and therefore they count on you for 1 or 2 aspects of work. Okay, once you have the experience, you build that power structure around yourself. Use an expertise that you have. Okay, so the most powerful groups in organization are most closely associated with the core beliefs and assumptions of this culture. But this is how the system has worked within the organization. Then the structure of the organization. So culture of an organization is affected by the organization and management structure. Okay, why do we say this? With the structured organization, it predicts or dictates lines of reporting, lines of communication, etc. within the organization. It shows a hierarchy of how things should be done. Okay, and more often than not, for if it's very bureaucratic, work should leave Dex A and go to Dex B, to Dex C, to Dex D before it gets to here. Okay, then if it's part of the culture, it becomes very difficult to change the bureaucratic nature of the organization. It becomes a culture. So the culture, the structure, it takes the culture of the organization. And the last one in the culture web is a control systems. Okay, so what's a control system? Normally, when we establish performance systems or establish systems, we want to check whether the systems would work as expected. And therefore, the control systems are there to monitor and confirm whether systems would work as expected. Yeah. So we have performance management systems, we have the reward systems, okay. And therefore, when you focus on those reward systems of performance, not to earn rewards, one way or the other, it's the culture that has determined how this thing should work in organization, and therefore you follow. Okay. So in this regard, we're saying that the culture web of the organization is made up of 6 interrelated elements in the culture, namely routines and rituals, stories and myths, symbols, power, structure, organization structure, and control systems. Now, if you remember our introduction, we said that there are 3 gurus in culture that we'll talk about, and one is Shane. Edgar came up with some levels of culture. Now, what are these levels of culture? According to Edgar, he mentioned the fact that there are 3 levels: the outer skin, the inner layer, and the paradigm, or basic underlying assumptions. Take note: the outer skin, of the artifacts, the inner layer, and the paradigm. And some of these things or elements can be changed, and some cannot be changed. But take note that these are interrelated elements, and therefore they interact with each other. Let's look at them in detail. Let's first talk about the outer skin. If it's outer skin, that means there's something you can see, right? Good. So this is how it is presented here. The artifacts made up of the visible structures and processes in the organization. That's the first one. Then the second one was the exposed values, or the inner layer. It deals with the philosophies, the mission, the ethics, strategies of organization. Then we have the basic underlying assumptions. This one we can't see, but more often it's taken for granted, but it has an impact on the organization. So what is the artifact or the outer skin? Now, this includes 1, the facilities and surroundings in which employees work help create culture. Okay, so these are things that we can see. When a visitor walks into the organization, what you can see makes up the outer skin, the artifacts, your buildings, the ambience, the way employees have dressed, okay, how you go about your work, etc. Okay, now even how you talk to your colleagues, okay, it's all important here. The language you use, etc. These are things that can be seen and therefore described as the outer skin or the artifacts, okay, of culture, the level of culture, to the first level. Now, the second one is the inner layer. Inner layer is the espoused value. These are the philosophies we mentioned, the ethics, the strategies, your goals, your stated values. Okay, so with our ethics, we have a formal code of ethical behavior expected to shape the attitude of all members. If you go contrary to such behaviors, you are found wanting. For instance, in some organizations which are service-oriented, you can see the customer is always right. And therefore, if you manhandle the customer, then you have gone way over the ethical behavior expected, and therefore it can be affected. Okay. Every organization will have its mission and values, etc. Okay, and they are expressed in such terms that they want to provide a service to community as well as provide the best quality of service to customers. Okay, so we know this is our mission, this is our vision, and therefore we want to work per the mission and vision of the organization. Okay, and the culture might also be expressed in the goals and strategies of the organization. But the bottom line, who would influence the level of culture of the organization? The leaders of the organization. So We began by talking about the outer layer, then the inner layer. Don't forget the inner layer. It's made up of the ethical behavior, the mission, the vision, the values, the goals, strategy of the organization, which is influenced by the leaders of the organization. Now, with this in mind, let's look at the third one, the paradigm, or we have the basic underlying assumptions. Now, let's take our time to explain this portion for you. Paradigm is like a range, okay? So it's a term for shared assumptions and attitudes about what really matters that are taken for granted and rarely discussed, taking it. So it talks about the fact that this is about assumptions, attitudes about what really matters, but they are taken for granted. Now, these affect the way an organization sees itself in the environment in which it operates, and is a real core culture of the organization. So, in a way, it's like it runs in the blood. However, it's more often than not rarely discussed. Okay, paradigm is not written down, and it's difficult to identify or explain. But the paradigm has also been described as the reason why the organization exists. That's why I mentioned the word core, deep down in the blood. Okay, it shows why you are there. Though you may really talk about it, but it's in the mind that we are here for this reason. So an example is given here. Okay, a police force that exists to catch criminals, fine. What about school? It's a place for learning, fine. We all know that. But how often do we talk about the fact that police should catch criminals? Okay, we know that aside that they do other things, but the core thing is to keep our cities safe. Okay, so paradigm is to talk about the outer layer, the inner, and the core, the basic underlying assumptions. Okay, and these are seen as the levels of culture within an organization. And this is as prescribed by Edgar. Okay, talking about levels of culture within the organization. Okay, so which of these can we change? Which of these can we change? Now, look at what Edgar Skin said. Changing culture is very difficult. However, the outer skin can be changed fairly easily. Of course, we can change our building, our color, our ambience, our dress code can be changed. But it is very difficult to change the paradigm, the core of the organization. It's very difficult to change. Okay, so take note of the differences and the levels and its impact that we can talk about. Now, so after Edgar, next person to talk about corporate culture is Handy. Now, Handy also came up with 4. He said cultural stereotypes. Okay, there are 4 different categories of corporate culture. And the first one he talks about is a power culture, also called the club culture, and a spider's web culture. They have a role culture, a task culture, a personal culture, also called existential culture. So let's look at the differences in these cultures that exist, okay, within an organization. Corporate culture. Now, let's not forget that corporate culture deals with how an organization is managed, and it starts from the top. Okay, so the first one, the power culture. Now, how is power diffused in the organization? Okay, more often, seen as power is at the central point and is spread throughout the entire organization. Okay, so power, authority, and influence spread out from this central point. Okay, but where is the point of control? Central point. So an example is like the spider in the web, as we said earlier on. The spider normally is in the middle of the web, and from there, the spider controls all that goes on. Okay, and that's what the power culture is mainly about. We often see this in small organizations or one-man business that's going to become companies. Okay, now when it happens, the owner is always present, and the owner is quite dominant in this type of business. He tells you what should be done. Without the owner, business does not go on. Okay, but for this to work, it is based on trust. Why? The owner has freedom and retains the power by writing very little down and relying on the spoken word. The example I gave, for most sole proprietors, business has become like companies. It also happens in that. So we don't have structures where things should work. Things are done based on the power held by the owner of the business. You can say, look, my son is not the CEO, respect him, and work is done. Okay, instead of writing these things down, follow a procedure, no. Okay, and that's a power culture. The boss will try to influence the people through the force of his personality and personal charm. So you may either warm to him or draw colder. If you draw colder, you may lose your job. Okay, and that's how the power culture would work. But what is the weakness of the power culture? It depends on the character of the boss. Okay, because if based on what the owner wants to do, he directs the culture of the organization. He does how things are done. But as the organization grows in size, what happens? One person cannot control everything. But it's difficult for them to let go, thinking they might lose their business. Okay, but one man controlling everything, what happens? The business may become inefficient unless the corporate culture is changed. It's introduced in such a way that now things will work per expectation. We have structures now working, and therefore other people may have the power, not just one person. Okay. So when the size of the people grow within the organization, it becomes very difficult for the power culture to work. Okay. Now let's look at the second one, the rule culture. How is culture developed here? By the role that is performed by everyone in the organization. Okay, so it's like we will have our job descriptions in the organization, right? And the job descriptions prescribe our rules per the structure of the organization. So let's say you're the CEO, deputy CEO, admin officer, okay, technical director, sales, customer service team, etc. Okay, so in the traditional hierarchy structure, the structure defines the role of each person in the organization and the function you must play. And therefore, there is formal lines of communication. Once a hierarchy and a structure, you know who to report to from one level to the other. Okay, and therefore, this can lead to a defined culture based on how work is done by the organization. Okay, so like we have here, a role culture has been compared with a pyramid of boxes, and each box will have its job description. So take an organogram, okay, and look at the various positions in the organogram, lines of reporting, lines of communication, etc. organogram, and therefore that's how the role culture develops. Okay, so the boxes remain in place and the culture is unchanged, even when you leave the organization. Okay, they are replaced and therefore you follow same. Okay, so to what extent is the role culture good? It can help for large organizations, okay, where you expect that employees are to keep the job as given. Okay, so people in organizations with role culture are managed and led. Okay, so they know what they're supposed to do. This is what to expect from you. You do it, you must move to the department, work must continue from here, you must report to this person. And that's how the role culture works. The next one is the task culture. What is the task culture? Unlike the role, the task culture will focus on the task and getting things done in a much efficient and effective way. Okay, so the task culture, we see the organization as a bit more flexible. If there is a task, you can form a work group. Okay, they work on the task, they complete the task, then they are done, they're disbanded. Okay, if another task comes up, you form a new work group, you work on the task, once it's done, they're disbanded. Okay, now this one makes use of the skills that they have because they come together to perform a task. And once they come together to perform a task, they have the competency required to perform that task. Okay, so we say they gain respect and authority from their knowledge and skills rather than from the official role within the work team. So like we said, the role, if you're a role, you're head of this, you are departmental, this, that's the position, okay? But this one, you are come together based on your competencies. And we see this work in project teams and development groups. And the last one is the person culture, also known as the existential culture. Okay, and this one, the entire structure is built around one individual or a group of individuals. And therefore, the rest of the organization would serve the needs of the central individual. Okay, now, what does it mean? Culture here is based on the view that the organization exists to serve the talented individuals or the person. Okay, so more often than not, you build a culture around a person or a group of people. Okay, and sometimes we have it here, but small parts of the organization might be structured in that way, not the entire organization. Okay, now let's look at examples of this. Sports or entertainment industries, small management consultancies, okay, or part of investment banks. If you take the entertainment industry, for instance, you may build a organization around a talented artist. Okay, so like Zylu, for example, it was built around one person. Okay, you have organizations that is built around one person. If it's a firm of lawyers, okay, tax consultants, etc., okay, you will have that person structure. Who the consultants are. Okay, so in a person with a organization with a person culture, the central individuals may share some common resources, such as a small admin support function. However, they operate independently and have some dedicated staff on their own. So if it's just an accounting consultancy firm, tax and audit firm, you may have the partners there, but you may have an admin team to support the partner carry out his work. Okay, now this is different from the power culture of a small organization. Okay, so in sum, we're talking about the types of corporate culture as described by Charles Handy. Charles Handy came up with the four. What are the four? Power culture, that is, deals normally with the small businesses, okay, small business owners, okay, who want to control the business. You have the role culture, where you have an organogram, the structure, hierarchy, kind of communication reporting, okay. The task culture, they do more of the project-based organizations. You assemble a team based on the competence. And the personal culture, also, the example given was like the accountancy firm, the law firms, the entertainment industry, where the organization is built around one person. Okay, we may have a small support staff for teach how things are done within the organization. Okay, so let's look at after this. Let's look at Hofstede. Get Hofstede is also a popular author on organizational culture, and he came up with certain aspects of culture, that's international perspectives on culture. According to Hofstede, they have what we refer to as national culture. Okay, so every culture or every nation has its culture, and that may have its impact on work. Okay, so based on his research in the 80s and early 90s, he came up with these national cultures and how it impacts organizational culture. That, of course, culture is a property of groups, not individuals. So there's not like an individual culture. No. Once you work in an organization, it is influenced by you form an organizational culture that must work with. Okay. And culture is the collective programming of the mind that distinguishes the members of one group from the members of another group. So how you think, how you reason, how you see things, your attitude, okay, of a group, not an individual. And this may vary because there are various groups in the organization. Okay. However, he mentioned the fact that there are different national cultures, and therefore the culture of a business organization in one country may differ from the culture of a business in a different country. And in multinational organizations, Talo Oil and a few multinationals, they face the challenge of trying to create a common culture. Why do we say this? Because it's a multinational, and people from different nationalities will work in such organizations and have an impact on the culture of the organization, and therefore you may have difficulty with the culture of the organization. Now, Hofstede comes with 5 dimensions talking about culture, and the first one is the power distance dimension. Power distance. The question is, to what extent is power diffused throughout the organization? Okay, now it could be low, it could be high. When power distance dimension is low, this means that there's an equal distribution of power within the organization. Okay, or is minimized. In this way, when power distance is low, take note, inequalities in the distribution of power within the organization are minimized. Now, some people may have positions. However, that position does not make them over superior over others. Okay, if we have a low power distance. So in such organization, it's difficult to identify who is of what position in the organization because power distance is low. But when power distance is high, okay, inequalities in power are regarded as acceptable to those without power. Okay, so if there's a decision, look at those who have the high power to make decisions. You are limited in what you're supposed to do. Okay, so these are the dimensions of power distance. It could be high, it could be low. Okay, if it is low, then it is even as subordinates. You have superiors, you have room to work, room to make decisions. You can use initiative to some extent. Okay, but where power distance is very high, you must always consult. Okay, because there are positions, so you must respect those positions. It is well known in the organization. Okay. Now, in countries like Sweden, New Zealand, okay, it is seen as they have low power distance dimensions. Okay, and then in Latin European countries like Spain and France, you have high power distance dimensions. The next dimension is individualism versus collectivism dimension. And this one, in some countries, the interest of the individual comes first before the collective interest of the group. Okay, so it's me first. Okay, me first. That is individualism. Okay, in some cultures, they look at the group. Okay, it's all of us. Okay, everything's about us. Okay, so according to Hofstede, Australia, Canada, okay, gives examples. Okay, in other countries, concern for group comes from consent from the individual. Indonesia as an example. Okay, so to what extent do we look out for individuals succeeding expectations, as against where it's a group thing, collective, we look out for each other, the dimension. Then the next one by Hofstede is uncertainty avoidance. And for this, sometimes there are some unfamiliar happenings or rules, okay, so that it's difficult to come out and talk about them. We tend to avoid certain things. That's called uncertainty avoidance. We feel threatened or endangered by unexpected and unfamiliar happenings. So when the culture of uncertainty avoidance is high, take note, culture of uncertainty avoidance is high. Work behavior such as precision and punctuality are highly esteemed. And we can give the instance of Japan and South Korea as examples of this. Okay, then the next one is masculinity versus femininity. To what extent do we believe that there's equality between men and women? So in some cultures, okay, we have the feminine culture or quality, modesty, intuition, okay, and man should be more aggressive and competitive. Okay, so if you're a man and you're not as aggressive and competitive, then question mark. Okay, this also explains some cultures that will cherish women and men. So there are some aspects of work women are not supposed to go there, and there's some aspect of men work is for men only. To what extent do national cultures either encourage masculinity or femininity or both? Okay, and the last one by Hofstede is the long-term orientation versus the short-term orientation. And this, some countries have the short-term orientation, short-term goals, short-term results, where some countries would want longer term. Okay, so short-term results. Okay, we want things done here and now today. Some too want to save for the future. Okay, and these are national cultures. And when these differences in national cultures meet in organizations, what happens? It becomes very difficult to form an organizational culture. And that's what Hofstede spoke about. Okay, so what have we discussed in this unit? We have defined culture in terms of organizational culture, corporate culture, and group culture. And we said that culture is very important for management. Why? Once they understand the culture of the organization, they can change the culture, they can manage the culture, they can build a positive attitude within the organization. Now, we've also examined factors that shape the culture of the organization. We mentioned the formal structure, we mentioned leadership, we mentioned the environment and the events. In addition, we've spoken about education, the 3 levels of culture. I hope you remember the 3 levels of culture by Shane, right? The 3 levels, the outer, the inner, and then the paradigm. Let's talk about the culture wave, the 6 aspects of culture wave: routines and rituals, stories and myths, symbols, power structure, control systems. Okay, so this makes up the culture wave. We've also discussed by handy the 4 different categories of corporate culture. One being the corporate culture, the role culture, the task culture, and the personal culture. And the last one was the Hofstede, who mentioned national cultures. Okay, and the mentions he gave: power distance culture, individualism versus collectivism, austerity avoidance, masculinity versus femininity, long-term orientation versus short-term orientation. On this note, we end unit 3, and next time we're moving on to unit 4 about the external environment of organizations. Thank you very much.